Welcome to the September edition of the Ag Economic Dialogue sessions. We're going to talk mostly about cows today, cow costs and the current situation that we're in with drought and prices and those types of things. So without any further ado, kind of a layout for today. We're going to talk, like I said, about current markets and the weather situation, look at some factors to consider that affect your cash or potential cash flows, and then also provide some tools to make changes to your operation to take advantage of some of those potentials that might be available to you. So the first thing we're going to hit and talk about is some cattle numbers. This is the July 1 cattle number inventory, and you can see there that the 2022 number compared to 2021 in July, the total cattle number was down about 2%. And this was before we started hearing about some of the sell-offs in Texas due to drought and weather conditions down in that area. So not record lows at this point, but we're pretty much on a downhill level, as you see there. If we break that out, we want to talk about just cows. We can look at the dairy cow numbers there in red, holding pretty consistent throughout those years listed there from 92 to 22. And you can see the ups and downs in the beef cow inventory and, down cycles due to drought and those types of things that affect inventory on a yearly basis, whether we have herd expansion and those types of things as well. So this chart here looks at that percent change in inventory, and this is a January 1 number. The thing I really want to hit on today, and as we're talking, is about how we can weather the storm, quote unquote, I guess, and be ready for different prices and market swings. We're ready for different feed availability swings, maybe, and that turns into profit swings as we're looking at feed costs and those types of things. But how can we manage a consistent cow herd so that when the whole inventory is shifting back and forth, we can take advantage of higher calf prices as they become available, not having to buy cows or keep replacement heifers back because we haven't had that need to restock our herds in those inventories. So how can we keep more consistent on a year-to-year basis instead of these swings in our own individual herds up here in South Dakota or wherever you might be watching from? So here's just a little refresher of where the beef cows are in the state. This is the January 1, 2022 numbers. So you can see there's about 30,000 cows, 30 million cows in the United States, and where they're kind of located right there in the central part of the United States. If we look at a year-to-date changes from 21 to 22, we can see that we lost about 719,000 of them. So there was that decline in numbers there. If we compare current numbers to the 2012 drought years, and that's kind of what people have been a lot of talk and conversations about in the media, is what happened to the 2012 numbers versus today. And you can see that there has been some decline in the numbers due to Montana had pretty big drought last year and early into this year, big fires and those types of things, reducing the amount of feed that they had available. And then down in through Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma actually had that increase, but Texas area, you can see that we've got some pretty good declines in cow numbers there as well, compared to our 2012 numbers. When you really think about it and you're thinking about all these cows going to town, law of supply and demand says, hey, there's lots of cows going to town, prices should be dropping, but we're actually not seeing that at all at this point up into this part of 2022. That dark red line down there at the bottom, that's the 2016 to 2020 average cow market, and it shows some of that seasonality with prices spiking in the fall and then dropping off towards those winter months when a lot of cull cows go to town. You can compare that to the 2021 average price, average number of cows going to town. And you can see that there's a 40 to 80,000 head increase between the number of cows that went to town in that 5-year time frame to 2021, and then an even another jump up 20 to 40,000 cows per month this year into 2022. So that's really, a lot of cows going to town, a lot of things moving around. That's where we've heard the 1 million head from Texas already leaving farms and ranches. I talked about that 1 million head of cows leaving with the drought monitor. So if we look at the drought situation from 2011 to 2022, here's the drought monitor snapshot from September 13th of 2011. You can see that D4 heavy concentration down in Texas and Oklahoma and surrounding states down there. And then a little bit of the drought effects up into the I states, into some of those corn producing states up there. When we compare that to the current situation, this was last week's numbers, you can see that we've had a pretty good decline in the percent of the nation that's covered by D4, but a lot of the area is covered by some type of D1, 2, or 3 effects from drought, including a lot of South Dakota up in that area. That's where we're raising the cows, that's where we're producing the forage, and winter grazing of wheat, winter wheat grazing and those types of things is also affected by that drought. So all of those numbers combined are really going to try to tie into that future cattle herd inventory number. And if we can keep South Dakota producers with good inventories and solid inventories on hand, maybe we're not facing some of those inventory swings, lack of calves going to town and those types of things. Let's take advantage of some potential price upswings. So I talked about the number of cows going to town and mentioned, if we have a lot of supply, a lot of animals headed to town, usually we see a decline in prices. Not happening this year, where you can see that 22 number is pushing up into that upper 90s, in that 90 to 95 average. I don't have a radio in my office, but if you turn on like DV auction or cattleusa.com, you can watch livestock sales all day, every day. And in my background, that's what I've had on. And I would almost bet some of those 12 to 1,400 pound cows that are in good condition coming through, they might actually push this average up into that $95 per hundredweight category this month coming up. There's been some pretty good sales on big groups of cows that are in good shape. So thinking about that as you go forward might be a consideration for any potential cull cows that you have to take advantage of our current fall prices before we get into those lower prices, traditionally lower prices of November, December, January for those cull cows. So then if we just jump over quick and look at feeder steer prices. So this is the weekly price for 700 to 800 pound feeder calves in South Dakota. You can see we've got a pretty good increase in price there from the 5-year average to compared to the 2021 numbers even. So nice to see that profit potential. Some steers that I watched yesterday, I think they were like 9 to 1,000 pounds, selling for about $1,500 to $1,600 a piece, hopefully making some of those buyers a little bit of profit as they went through the ring from those feeder calf prices and now sending those yearlings into town. So some numbers for us there that we kind of like to look at. If we think about the futures and what's going on and what might be coming down the pipeline, I pulled the fed cattle prices and the feeder cattle prices on Monday. So we're looking at out into 2023, they're still up in that 150s range for some of our fat cattle prices. And we're looking at feeder calves out into March in that 188 range. So by the time we add in some basis for South Dakota cattle being positive, if we've got lighter weight calves than, the average price is based on the CME here, we could be looking at some $2 calves pretty easy come fall and throughout most of January, February, March 2023. So those are some numbers that we need to be thinking about and figuring out maybe ways to lock in some of those minimum prices. Really want to be thinking about that calf that's on the ground right now, what's out in pasture. We also maybe want to be thinking about and considering some floor options for calves that are still in gestation and will be born this spring. So be watching those prices, and if you can find profit in those numbers, figuring out a way that we can lock some of those prices in. So one of the big goals and the things that I want to really talk about today and hit on is how do we maintain that factory so that we don't have that inventory fluctuation all the time back and forth. One of the biggest questions or most common questions that I get is how much does it take to raise a cow? What's it take to run her for a year? And I've gone away from the econ side of saying just it depends to it's pretty much a number that says it's $600 to $1,000 per cow herd. Depending on your herd and what your inputs are and what your reproductive efficiency and management styles are, that's really going to change the cost of production for that cow if you're trying to figure out what you need to break even. So Dave Delaney here has a quote that says, the more things you have going on, the better your accounting system needs to be and the better the detail that needs to be involved. So that's kind of what we're going to hit on for a little bit here as we keep going forward, is that unit cost of production, or that enterprise budget, you might hear it called as well. We really need to know what it's costing us to run those calves, whether you're creep fed operation, whether you're feeding them all out on range. What are the costs that are going into that cow to make one calf ready for sale? So we need to look at our fixed costs, those costs that don't really change whether we have 100 cows or we've got 50 cows. So things like your real estate taxes and those types of things would be some of your fixed costs compared to the variable costs, where it might be some of your feed expenses or some of your AI supplies and those types of things. Those are going to be those variable costs. We also need to know your market price expectation and the pounds of the calf that you're going to be selling, because we can't establish our profit without knowing what that market price is going to be and having a good idea of what the production is going to be. Because the little formula there shows that, it's total cost divided by the units that you produce. And those units that you can produce can be the number of calves that you actually sell, or if you want to look at it on a total pound basis, how many pounds are you sending to town? But we have to know what we're going to measure so that we can manage that in the long run. These things are really dependent on fertility and growth, because all of the costs from the time that calf is, the cow's exposed to the time she sells that calf to town is what your unit cost of production is based off of. So if you have a poor calving season or a poor breeding season, that affects your unit cost of production, because all those costs are now divided by a smaller number of calves or fewer pounds that go to town. We can start looking at different benchmarks. The industry recognizes some common benchmarks, and these are things that a lot of operations should be looking at and should be managing to make sure that they're staying profitable. And we really want to look at, the breeding costs that we have involved, whether we're AI breeding or bull breeding. Those costs are out there, and we need to know what those are. We need to have it figured out on a calf cost, either $1 per head or per 100 rate. And then we need to be looking at our pregnancy percentage and our weaning percentages and seeing if there's ways that we can make improvements to those numbers. If we've got a 70% pregnancy rate, is there a way we can bump that to 80 through a better nutrition program, through enhanced AI programs, or more bull power, or whatever we might need to look at to make those changes? And then we might want to think, maybe is there a way we can improve our weaning percentage 5%? What can we do to make sure that we have more calves weaned? One of the big things that come to me, and somebody will say, yep, I sold 100% calf crop this year. And I have to smile and ask them where they started measuring from. Was it 100% of the calves that they took to pasture that year? Because it really is officially starts from every cow exposed. So we're figuring that pregnancy percentage and the weaning percentage from the number of cows that went out with the bull or to the AI pasture that year. So we have to start at that basic spot and compare all of our numbers all the time to that similar starting point. So I'm not going to turn this into a record keeping session. I'm just going to stress that record keeping is very important, and we need to be able to accurately and completely fill out all of those financial statements that are listed there. We need to be able to create a budget and have some of those ideas on what it's going to cost us to raise that calf from conception to sale, barn time, weaning time, whichever works for you. And then some forecasting in the prices so that we can do better with our marketing and laying in some inputs as we go forward there as well. The next bullet there talks about different managerial accounting systems, and moving from an accrual to a year-to-date accounting system might be something that is beneficial for your operation because it helps you tie in the actual costs from the date we turn out bulls to the pasture for that cow and to raise that calf. We also need to be thinking about enterprise allocation of all costs that are related to that cow, to our cow herd and to other enterprises that we have going on. And sometimes that gets to be the tricky part because you have one electric bill, and now we have to allocate how much electricity goes to the family and the house, how much needs to go to the cows that might be using a water tank that's got a water heater in it over the winter, compared to the number of, or the amount of usage from a feedlot situation, or the corn dryer that might be running in the background, and all those other things. So divvying out some of those expenses becomes tricky, but an integral part of determining that unit cost of production or in that enterprise budget. And then keeping some type of inventory system as the last item there, but it's also an item that gets overlooked because when we run out of one bottle of medicine that we need to treat an animal that's sick, or if we've got something, pink eye issue or something like that going on, if we don't have that bottle around, we either don't treat the animal and just hope they get better. We've got a bad eye or a lump or something like that, and we just let it go. Or we have to run to town and get that bottle of LA 200, 300, or whichever medicine you're looking for at that time. So that wasn't a plug for any one medication over the other. So just as a point of clarification there. But we really need to be thinking about that inventory system so we have what we need on hand when we need it, so that we can do our best on all the other things that we're doing. Some of the areas of concern when we're starting to put those budgets together that maybe we can make some changes on are these big three of depreciation, labor, and feed. And we're going to hit a little bit on each one of those here as we go through. So if we talk about depreciation, this is maybe one of the biggest expenses that's most commonly overlooked because we don't write a check for it. And since we're not writing a check, it must not be there, right? Well, if you were part of any of the windstorms early this spring and had insurance checks written to you for buildings that went down or roofs that needed to be replaced and those types of things, you can notice probably on the write-out that the insurance company knows what depreciation is, because they reduce the amount of your insurance payment check back to you for that depreciation factor. So depreciation is basically that decrease in value due to the age of assets, whether it's fences, water tanks, buildings. It can even be purchased livestock. If you buy cows to put into your breeding herd, there's a depreciation number on those cows as well. We really need to be thinking about depreciation when we're thinking about replacement costs versus the extended life of that piece of equipment. If we're trying to purchase a new piece of equipment due to reducing the amount of income tax we pay instead of replacing equipment because it's reached the end of its useful life, we want to be thinking about more than just that income tax payment prevention. we want to think how that's going to affect us down the road. What does that new purchase do to our cash flow situation as we look at cash needs coming up, and this month, next month, 2 years down the road, as we're making payments on that new piece of equipment and those types of things. So make a solid attempt to evaluate the impacts of that purchase on your income statement and your future cash flow projection. There's a bullet there that says maybe we could compare lease or rental options or custom harvest versus purchasing new pieces of equipment. Maybe that's a more effective way for your operation to get the things done that you need done, instead of making some of those large asset purchases, which might require an additional note or something like that. So think about some of those other ways to look at the purchase of new pieces of equipment, or even cattle and other livestock that maybe you purchase as well. I don't think it should come as a surprise to you if you've watched the news at all. You've heard about the cost of labor increasing everywhere. The additional component to that is that it's harder to find somebody that knows how to do the things you need done on your operation. Sending somebody out to work cattle that has never worked cattle before probably is going to require a better training program for your operation than you have had to have in the past. Making sure they know how to utilize the flight zone on that cow and to work calm instead of loud and jerky and those types of things. So that training position that training strategy is going to be very important in this day and age when you're trying to find assistance on your operations. Another thing that we really want to be thinking about is, how are we going to pay individuals so that they stay on your operation, and what kind of reward systems do you have available for them? Keeping good labor is probably one of the best ways that you can reduce your labor expenses due to equipment breakage and those errors in judgment back and forth that way. So we really need to be thinking about, how do we do a good job of creating a job description and a position expectation for those people that we have coming onto our operation, developing a wage or salary system that is beneficial to them and financially sustainable to your operation, but also has some of those other rewards involved as well. The AU, the animal units versus your full-time employees might want to be evaluated as well, as we get into thinking about how do we reduce or maintain this labor component. Maybe you evaluate the number of full-time employees you have and look at contracts for specific issues or situations. So instead of having 3 full-time hired men around, you go down to 2. And if something happens, like derecho storms come through, you hire somebody to do the roofing work and those types of things, and the cleanup work related to those types of problems. Or we're hiring additional seasonal labor to come in and help with harvest, so that we have our main people doing their main jobs really well all the time. And then those time specific or in event specific activities are taken care of by non full-time employees, so that you can try to maintain that labor workload a little bit better. Herd management and breeding seasons are really important to be thinking about. We just did a research study in 5 sale barns across the state of South Dakota last big calf run time. And we really found a price separation between herds that are able to run bigger numbers through instead of having a lot of different weight cuts. I can't do much about the bull and heifer splits generally, unless you want to move into some of your sex breeding and some of those sex semen things. But if you're looking at ways that you can add pounds and money to your calf herd, shorten up that calving season so that you've got a larger number of big calves going to town, was one of the best ways that you can do that. Another thing that buyers really were looking at were some price increases if you had a verified herd health program. What was the vaccination protocol? They not only wanted to know that these calves had all their shots, they wanted to know that at calving they had these 5 shots, or at turnout they had these 3, and then at mid-season they had another round of shots and what they were. So those herd health programs and working with your veterinarian are very, very important when it comes to sale barn time. Even bigger probably than the whole herd health plan is the calves that we saw come in that had a dot in their eye or had a bad eye yet. If they came in with a limp or any remnants of a lump or something like that, those animals were pulled pretty fast and received a really significant price stock. So any of those preventative herd health components that you can add into your operation are going to be very cost effective down the line. So deciding how you're going to have a portable corral available to treat pink eye out in pasture or whatever it is that happens is really important. The breeding soundness exam and culling criteria for your bulls and cows is another thing that you really want to be thinking about. That soundness exam on 1 or 2 bull pastures is pretty critical. You have 1 bull go bad and it could break your whole herd operation for that year with the number of open cows that you have. Or if you've got really big pastures and your cow herd gets split, making sure we've got enough bull power out there to cover everything is going to be very, very important. Another thing that you really want to be thinking about with those bulls and that culling criteria, everybody likes to say I've got a 10-year-old bull or something like that, but that 10-year-old bull also has 10-year-old genetics. Seed stock producers are up in their production game and they're improving genetics as they go forward. So you might actually be missing out on potential pounds because you've got old genetics that you're using in that older bull that you've scattered around. Additionally, you might be losing out on some salvage value on that older bull. Bulls that come through the sale ring the last couple of days and weeks that I've been watching, if they're heavy muscled, good Reagan bulls, they're bringing pretty top dollar. Those older bulls that's starting to get wrung out, they're not keeping their condition as much, did not make as much, bring back as much money in their salvage value. So we really want to be thinking about that as well. The heifer development versus purchase, I think that's like a chicken and egg discussion. Which one should be done for each individual operation depends on your individual needs and requirements there. It's an expensive component to the operation either way. So you really have to do some numbers and some penciling to figure out which one works best for your operation. And that last one on herd management there, that body condition scoring, is a huge determinant in the percent pregnancy and percent weaning percentage on your operation. Thin cows that are in low body condition do not breed back very well. They do not breed back early in the breeding season generally, which thus affects not only your breeding percentage, but it's also your weaning percentage. So very important components to be thinking about as we move forward into your operation and try to make better plans that way. So we just talked a little bit about the genetics of that bull that you have coming in. We're not going to turn this into a genetics class either or anything like that, but find the EPDs that work for your operation, find the ones that make the most economical sense for your operation and the ones that you understand. It's easy to read a bull catalog and get lost in the number of EPDs that are there anymore. They've come a long way from the standard birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, and maybe a milk EPD. There's a full lineup of them now. Find the ones that work for your operations. Find the ones that have the correlations that you need to make the most success in your operation. You need live calves and you need calves that grow. So figure out those components and make those decisions that way. When you're buying those animals, make sure you're also tying in the environment and their genotype effects to the bulls that you're buying. Make sure that you're matching feed requirements and feed needs for some of those bigger cows that you might have if you're looking for a lot of growth. But if you don't have a lot of grass, maybe some of those larger framed big bulls are not what you really are looking for. I think one of my favorite ways for a lot of producers to add weight to their cow herd or to the calves in their cow herd is through the use of hybrid vigor and heterosis. Look at those different crossbreeding operations that might work for you. Find operations that can help you put a good plan together. And then keep those in mind that as you're thinking about replacement strategies or returning cows to your operation, maybe your expectation is that cow has a calf every year. Or maybe we make a better goal for our cow herd is that that cow has a 500-pound calf every year. So we're not just looking at her bringing in a calf, we need her to bring in a big calf so that she's actually making some money for us, which helps you look at some of those culling bases based on age and those types of things back and forth. The last component that we're going to talk about is some feed as the biggest cost to our cow herds. So as we're thinking about unit cost of production, most of that number, probably 60 to 70, maybe even higher percentage for some guys, is the feed cost and what it costs to feed those animals. So we really need to monitor and measure everything that we're doing to ensure that we're doing the best job possible there. And it's kind of easy to do this time of year, right? You're trying to get your rations balanced and everything put together, and we're being very careful on our measurements and putting the right number of loads and scoops into the feed wagon. It gets a little trickier when it's 20 below and it's cold out and we don't want to be outside, but we still have to make sure that we're feeding those balanced rations that we've had created. We're doing the forage tests if we're bringing in new feedstuffs to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can that way as well. So that's a really, really huge component. And not only balancing those rations for protein and energy, the big two components, but we also might need to make sure that we've got a good balanced mineral and vitamin protocol as well, because those prenatal rations that you're feeding those cows really, really, really tie into the immunity effects of that baby calf. And a healthy baby calf that doesn't need additional help getting going and it's got its foot headed in the right spot is going to grow faster and grow cheaper for you, which in the long run returns more money to your bottom line. So it's a very important component, not only to having cows in good body condition, but calves that are born healthy and ready to grow and grow fast. We also need to think about pasture productivity and matching those the production potential of that pasture with our cows' needs. If we've got different cool seasons versus warm season grasses, maybe we can match those grazing times up better to meet the needs of the cow, depending on her gestational stage as well. Alternative feedstuffs can really come into that balanced ration and creating maybe a more economical balanced ration for you. If there's a different feedstuff that you can add in and get it in at the right price, maybe we can meet some of those nutritional needs at a cheaper rate. And then the bottom one down there, the cost of your delivery system. What percent waste does your hay foraging or your hay harvest have? How about hay storage or silage storage? And then how are you feeding it and how much loss is there? Those components really add into the cost of feed. And a lot of times they're overlooked because, we throw the hay bale out on the ground and it's gone, but did they eat it or did they trample it? Or was it, now it's tied up in the waste manure product and those types of things. We need to really have an idea about how much waste that we have from each of our feeding programs as well. This time of year, or this type of year when we're in the drought situation, the conversation is about drought plans and destocking rates and how we're going to destock so that we can maintain our cow herd. As we're thinking about those things, we need to think about the cost of destocking, not only in the cost of losing the genetic potential that we have in our cow herd and those types of things, but also if we sell and downsize cows this year, we have fewer calves next year coming in to help pay bills and maintain our cash flow situation. We also have the cost of either keeping heifers that maybe would have went to the sale barn so that we can create replacements, or we have to buy replacements back into the operation. So we need to be thinking about, how can we maybe be a bit understocked during times of plentiful rainfall, so that when we have drought conditions and grass production reductions, we don't have to sell off as many cows or maybe any cows, because we can better maintain that consistent herd number. So we've got to be thinking about that forage goal, the stocking rate that we have, and getting the cows to do most of the harvest for us as long as we can, instead of having to put up expensive feed or buy expensive feed supplements that we might need to add in. And as we're trying to utilize some of those additional forages, especially like late into the fall, or we're grazing corn stalks or something like that, making sure we've got the appropriate mineral program tied into the operation is also a critical component to that decision and to what we're doing out in those grazing programs. The last thing that we're kind of talking about related to feed is what else is eating. How many horses are around? How many pets are around that are just kind of there hanging out, eating feed? And what kind of feed loss do they have that needs to be allocated somewhere? So we need to be thinking about where their costs are evaluated at and where they're allocated to. If we're using the horses in our cow operation, maybe we allocate their feed costs to that calf that needs to bring that profit back in the long run. So be thinking about those things as you're putting your budgets together as well, and thinking about how much feed do I need, because we have to feed these animals too. But also, where's that feed going to go and how am I going to allocate those prices? I think this is the last slide on things that we can look at to make changes and look at some of those opportunity costs is the asset repairs and maintenance. So how are we taking care of our equipment? What kind of maintenance schedule do we have going on with them so that we can make sure that we lengthen their useful life and reduce, hopefully, the number of really expensive breakdowns that we incur. Large repair bills are some of those really scary things that keep people up at night because we haven't put those into the budget at all anywhere. So, making sure we're doing oil changes, running combines in to be evaluated to ensure that bearings are taken care of so we don't have a fire in one of those. Just checking the lug nuts, every second day or maybe every day to ensure that we don't have a tire issue on any of the tractors or something like that. Making those repairs as you go through, checking hydraulic hoses, because expensive hydraulic fluid leaking on the ground due to leaky hoses or connections is an expensive component. And it goes out into the house as well. After a storm comes through or you got some pretty good wind, going up and checking shingles with the tube of blackjack to stick those shingles back down really might, it's time consuming and it's a pain at the time, but if we can reduce or eliminate some of those bigger expenses down the road, that's really something that'll help us keep the profit and sustainability of our operations as we go forward. So if we talk about controlling some of these feed costs and looking at different decisions, I'm just going to throw a handful of slides up here to wrap up with today. But we need to know what we're feeding. And this goes back to that feed test. I just started throwing numbers up there, or throwing different types of forages up there based on what comes in as this is what I'm using to put my budget together. Maybe we've got new crop grass versus old crop grass that's sitting out in the field yet. Maybe it's a grass hay alfalfa mix. Maybe it was harvested in June when it's really pretty and green and it's got a blooming head of seeds on there that actually have some nutritional value compared to something that was put up in August or September this year. Completely different feed values in those types of products. Same way for corn that's got 150 bushel corn in it versus 2 bushel corn. We need to know what we're feeding so that we can adequately make adjustments to those rations and add the right nutrients and minerals back into it. If we look at some price comparisons based on different protein percentages, but we're actually looking for the actual price of crude protein. This is where doing a little bit of due diligence and making sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. As far as your feed needs go, you can see I've got $300 to $200 alfalfa there, and it ranges anywhere from 12.5 to 16% crude protein. If we run the formula cost per ton by dry matter times the crude protein, we come up with some crude protein prices per ton. So we can actually see that the best value in this situation is that 14% crude protein alfalfa, number 3 for $200. You might have said, well, that's a no-brainer. It was the cheapest one. But as you start looking and comparing, if we were bought $250 a ton alfalfa number 1 at only 12.5% crude protein, that really was not the best bang for our buck compared to that $300 alfalfa number 2. When you're putting your budgets together, you also have to make sure that you add in the actual cost of getting it to the animals. So if you were buying this forage and it was 25 to 200 miles away, we have to make sure that we're adding those expenses in as well. So you can see what the mileage, if we've got a $5 per mile freight charge added to it, how that adjusts our prices on a crude protein basis. So keep those numbers in mind as you're making the feed decisions. And to help you there, I put the website at the bottom. It's on the SDSU extension.edu webpage. And if you go to the Ag Business tab and find all of our tools and calculators, this is the feed nutrient calculator. Additionally, we had the conversation about waste and what that adds to your cost. So this is an example set of numbers that's on the website as well. And you can see the forage inventory and demand calculator listed there. Anywhere from 5 to 20% waste, depending on the way we store the feedstuffs or the way that we're feeding the stuff. You can see how many tons of what we need is wasted. 61.5 tons to 245 tons of waste based on our calculations. So that's $20,000 worth of change in value. So the less feed that we waste, the more we have available at the end of the year to do something else with, because $20,000 seems to add up in my book a little bit. And then, we talked determining your unit cost or production. This is the cow-calf or the cow budget out of the beef cattle budgets, also on the SDSU extension webpage. And you can put in your feed rations, put in your feed prices. What does it cost for your veterinarian drug expenses? What kind of supplies do you need? What type of marketing expenses do you incur when you go to the sale barn? Breeding fees and those types of things all added together. And then we can figure out what our operating costs are, and it runs all the figures and the numbers for you. So once you know what you're going to feed throughout the year, we can put that budget together and look at what break even for our calf is. So different budgets there, one for beef cows, one for heifer development. We're looking at some backgrounding options, some finishing steer different weights from different weights that we bought them at, or retained ownership. So if we're taking that weaned calf all the way to a finished animal. So lots of options that we've created there so that you can make some hopefully better decisions on what you're taking to the sale barn and knowing that you have a profit potential with it. So if you want to get a hold of me, I don't always get my email address and phone number put up as part of the dialogue session, but there is my contact information if you need it. And I'd be happy to help talk you through any of those calculators or have a discussion on ways that changes can be made to your operation as well.